Hello class, this is the first part of our Exam 1 review. I have a lot of problems here, so you can just go through and push pause when you see a problem, work through it. If you don't know how to do it, you can watch my explanations. If you do know how to do it, you can just skip over the explanations. So let's get started. First problem we have is change 48 over 7 into a mixed number. So when we look at these problems, we think, okay, well, how many times does 7 go into 48? We know 7 times 7 is 49, so that's a little too much. But 6 times 7 is 42. So 7 goes into 48 6 times. And how much is left over? Well, 48 minus 42 is 6. We keep the denominator of 7. And your mixed number is 6 and 6/7. The next problem says change 3/5 into a percent. Okay, so let's try that one. Always when we do these problems, the 3 on top is the number that's going to be under the division sign. So the number on top goes under the divide sign. And the number on bottom, the denominator, goes in the outside. So now we have, how many times does 5 go into 3? Well, it doesn't. So what do we do now? We can add a decimal after the 3 and add in a 0. Okay, now we can say, how many times does 5 go into 30? 5 goes into 30 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. Subtract. And we're done, except we need to bring this decimal straight on up. Okay, so 3/5 is the same as 0.6 as a decimal. So what is 0.6 as a decimal? As a percent. We got to move that decimal spot over 2 times to the right. And if there's a missing space, like right here, you have to add in a 0. So 0.6 is equal to 60%. Okay, let's try the next page. Here we've got a mixed number and we need to change it into an improper fraction. So in order to do this, I like to say, okay, we've got a 3. I like to draw these arrows here. 3 times the denominator, so we're going to be 3 times 15, and then up to the 12 with adding. So that's 3 times 15 plus 12. 3 times 15 is 45 plus 12. That's equal to 57. And don't forget to put the original denominator in, the 15. So 57 over 15. The next problem says we want to change 0.225 or 225 thousandths into a fraction and simplify. So the very first thing we need to do is, well, what number? We know that it's 225. So we have to figure out which decimal place it's in. The first one's a tenths, hundredths. The 5 is in a thousandths place. So that means we are going to put this fraction with a denominator of 1,000. We read that 225 1,000ths. Now how do we simplify that fraction? Well, there are a couple different ways to think about it. I noticed that both of these numbers have a 5 or a 0 at the end. And if that's the case, you can always divide by 5 in both cases. I know how to count by 25s, so I can divide both of these things by 25. I think I'm going to do that to simplify it. So 225 divided by 25, and 1,000 divided by 25. Now if I start counting by 25, I will get 25, 50. Okay, so I know that there are 4 25s in 100. So in 200 there are 8 25s. 225 makes 9 25s. Now 1,000's a little trickier, not too much, but I know that 25 goes into 100 4 times. So 25 and 100 is 4. And then when I subtract and bring down that other 0, 25 goes into 1,000 40 times. So your simplified answer is 9 divided by 40. Okay, now we got a couple just like addition, subtraction, division of fractions. So we'll start here with this one. Now, when we want to do things with fractions, especially multiplication or division, we need to change both numbers just into fractions. It's hard to work with mixed numbers. So what we do with the 14, to change it into a fraction, we just put it over 1. And then we need to change this mixed number into an improper fraction, kind of like we did before. We're going to go 2 times 11, and then add the 6. So 2 times 11 is 22, plus 6 is 28 over 11. And don't forget, it was negative. So we need to keep it negative down here. Now we've got 14 over 1 divided by negative 28 over 11. This is when we do that trick that a lot of people say, flip and multiply. So we're going to take this second fraction and flip it over. Keep the first one the same, 14 divided by 1, and then change the division to multiplication. So 14 over 1 times negative 11 over 28. Now here's a part where you can do the trick that you might have learned, that you can simplify before we multiply. And that's going to be really helpful for this one. Notice the 14 over here on the 28. Both have something in common. We can divide both by a 14. So if we divide 14 by itself, we get a 1. Divide 28 by 14, we get a 2. That makes it so much easier. We just multiply straight across now. 1 times negative 11 is negative 11. And 1 on the bottom times 2 is 2. So our final answer is negative 11 halves. Okay, let's do the next problem. We've got 2 fractions and they want to be subtracted. So in order to do this, we need to find a common denominator. What could be common between 9 and 7? Well, there's not an easy, simple answer, but one thing you can always do is multiply each thing by the other denominator. So on this side, we multiply by 7. Whatever we do this to the bottom fraction, we do to the top as well. And on the right, to make it the same as this denominator, 9 times 7, we have to multiply this by 9. And we do that to the top as well. So now our problem becomes 8. 2 times 7 is 14, divided by 63. Subtract 3 and 45 over 63. Now at this point you might notice, oh, that's going to be hard to subtract. We're not going to be able to do 14 minus 45. So one thing we can do right now is we can say, okay, I'm going to borrow one whole number. So instead of an 8, that's going to be a 7. And one whole number as a fraction is just this fraction, which was 14 over 63, plus 63 out of 63. Which gives us 7 and 77 out of 63. Okay, now we're ready to subtract these two. I'm going to do it on this side over here. So we have 7 and 77 over 63 minus 3 and 45 over 63. That gives us a total of 77 minus 45 is 32 over 63. And 7 minus 3 is 4. Now it turns out that this 32 divided by 63 can't be simplified at all. You could break it up into its parts and multiply all the numbers that you get to get those two big numbers, and it won't, nothing will simplify. So that's the end of that answer. Okay, and finally we got some adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing of decimals. So let's begin with this very first problem. With decimals, with adding and subtracting them, we always line up the decimal places. So I'm going to rewrite this problem. Negative 12.304. With the other decimal, negative 4.9. Where the decimals are right underneath each other. Then after that we can add in some extra zeros and subtract. Now this does say minus 4.9, but notice they're both negative. When both numbers are negative, you actually add the numbers together and then keep the negative sign. So we're going to keep this negative sign, but we're going to add these two numbers together. So 4 plus 0 is 4, 0 plus 0 is 0, 3 plus 9 is 12, 2 plus 4 plus 1 is 7, and 1. Bring the decimal straight down and keep the negative. And there's our answer for that. Sorry, it's having a hard time drawing these dots for me. That's a decimal right there, 17.204. All right, and our last problem for this section of our video is the following. We've got 64.8. The first number is the number that goes under the divide sign. So 64.8 divided by 0.04. To divide with decimals, we got to get rid of the decimal. So we're going to move this decimal over all the way to the end, which means we're going to move it 2 spaces. If we did it 2 spaces over here, we have to do it 2 spaces inside the divide sign as well. So 1, 2. The decimal goes here at the end. But there's an extra space, so we need to add a 0 in there. Okay. Now we divide. 4 into 6 is 1. 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract. 6 minus 4 is 2. Bring down the 4. 4 divided by 24 and 4 into 24, is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. We subtract. Bring down the 8. 4 into 8 is 2. 2 times 4 is 8. We bring down one more time, and we get 0. So 4 and a 0 is 0. That's the end of the problem because the decimal is right here. It would come straight up in your answer. So your final answer would be 1,620.